This is Ask Lisa, a podcast to help people understand the psychology of parenting now in the midst of a pandemic. Psychologist Dr. Lisa Damour, author of 2 New York Times best-selling parenting books, takes your questions. And I'm co-host Reena Ninan, a journalist and mom of 2. Some of what we talk about comes from raising children ourselves. Most of the time, I'll be getting answers to your parenting questions. So send your questions to Ask Lisa at drlisadamour.com. Episode 19, How Will the Pandemic Affect My Child Long Term? I just can't believe we're entering the 10th month of this pandemic now.
I know. One of the things I think about, I bet you think about this too. Like, remember in the middle of March when everybody's like, okay, 3 weeks, we're just going to hunker down. We're going to ride this out.
Yeah.
If somebody had told us in March that we would be here now still, I don't even know what I would have made of that information.
Yeah, some things are best left not told in the moment.
You don't want to know.
And imagining that, not having toilet paper was the worst at that moment.
Yeah.
Was the worst of our fears. And so it's just hard even thinking ahead. We're hopefully trying to merge, but we know the next 3 months are going to be tough.
Yeah, they're going to be really tough. And we're coming to terms with that. It's a tough one.
Yeah. We got a letter from a mom who's sort of talking about the lack of optimism and how do you push forward in this? And she says, "Dear Lisa, I feel like I should be optimistic about the news that we'll have vaccines next year, but I've never been more sad and unable to motivate. My kids were lucky enough to go to school this fall, but have now shifted to remote learning. My husband lost his job, and while we are not living paycheck to paycheck, it is affecting us. Basic things I find hard to finish, but my biggest worry is, how will quarantine affect the development of my children? Beyond their schoolwork, what are they missing that they will never get back? How can I make up for us being locked in? The sadness, the feeling that we are never getting out of this moment. I worry they pick up on my sadness. What should I be looking out for? I'm so grateful for your advice each week. It really has helped me get through this fall. Thank you."
Oof.
There's a lot in here, isn't there?
Yeah. There's a lot. And it's interesting, Reena, I'm starting to hear this question all of a sudden about what's the long-term impact. And part of me wonders if it is not a coincidence that we can now ask that when we start to see where the exit might be. That even though the vaccines, we know it's going to take time, I almost wonder if people didn't feel like they could really ask this question until we knew that there is a real end date and we can see it somehow, on the horizon. We still know, though, we are in this for at least a year in total. Mm-hmm. And I think we're realistically in it for a year plus several months. And we do need to be wondering what this really means for kids.
So when you're looking at it from a psychological standpoint, what do you have to worry about? I think about even the kids who are starting their college freshman year. They're not going to get that back. We don't know how many more years this could affect us and the things that have happened this year that could have long-term effects. What are they? Some kids have lost parents.
Yeah. So there's some huge stuff. And I have to say, earlier in the pandemic, I was like, oh, kids are resilient. They'll bounce back. It'll be okay. And I still think that's true for most kids. But, let's be honest. This is going to be many, many months, well over a year. There will be material impact. And for some kids, it will be big, obvious stuff. There will be kids who do not go to college because of this, who were on a path to go to college, who do not go to college. That is huge. That's beyond the scope of what I can address as a psychologist, but we have to say that, right? And there will be kids whose lives circumstances are dramatically altered, bluntly damaged, right? Either it's the death of a parent or the death of both parents I've heard about in some horrible situations. There are things at that scale. They're hard to even comprehend, but I think we have to really acknowledge them before we even get to the more, probably more likely broader generic things that we want to think through also.
So can you name it? Can you say what are the specific things that you really feel you just can't say, oh, time's going to heal that one?
Yeah, I can. I worry about mental health disorders. I worry about more kids, more teenagers having diagnosable depression. I worry about more kids, more teenagers meeting diagnostic criteria for anxiety disorders. So not just sadness, not just expectable healthy anxiety, but having it go to a degree where we would say, okay, this is not normal and expectable levels of mood disturbance. Like, we are now into pathology. We are now into something that's grounds for concern.
When you look at this, what's your response mechanism? Like what can we do to help in these situations?
Well, if we think about like what to do if we're worried that our kid is depressed or anxious, I think do not pass, do not, what do they say? Do not pass go, do not collect $200. Like, go right to your pediatrician, go right to your healthcare provider and get help. And I want to say this to, over and over again, we can treat depression. We know how to help.
Yeah.
In terms of anxiety, it's so important to always remember that avoidance feeds anxiety. So parents can head off an anxiety disorder if they don't let their kid avoid the things they fear. So kids don't start with full-blown anxiety disorders. What often happens is they're frightened of something and then they avoid it. And then the thing they're frightened of feels even scarier. And then they're more likely to avoid it. And then it blossoms into a full-blown anxiety disorder. And this is one, Reena, I think about this a lot. When we come back together and it's time for us to live normally, there are going to be a lot of kids and also plenty of grown-ups who need help not avoiding the world. We've done it for so long.
Yeah.
So another thing we can do to actually prevent long-term trouble is at the first opportunity, when it is safe to re-engage, we got to do it. We've got to help our kids do it, even if we are tense about it. Because if we continue to avoid when we can engage again, then you are basically setting the stage for an anxiety disorder.
This mom in this letter says she just wants to know, what else am I missing beyond your academics? What should we be concerned about for the needs of our children that'll help them function better in the coming years?
There are things beyond academics. I think we should rest on academics, though, for a minute, right? Because, if we're thinking about what does this mean for lots of kids? So the good news is it sounds like this mom feels like the academic piece is not the big problem. It's not the thing that's driving her concern. And that's good. And actually, I want to rest on that for a minute because schools are doing amazing work even in the pandemic. Kids are learning even in the pandemic. And that's amazing. Like, that actually is an incredible thing. And one of the things, sort of as an aside, I was in touch with a friend this week who I haven't talked to for a while. And I was like, hey, I haven't heard from you. Just want to check in. How are you doing? And he wrote back and he was like, oh, it's such a hard time in the country. But honestly, I've had an incredibly productive year. And I thought, that's really good for him to say that and to feel that. And I think that's actually true for a lot of people, that they're like, I have worked a lot this year and gotten a lot done. And it helped me a bit to hear him text that to me or to read that text. Because I think when things are so hard, it's easy to feel like, oh man, like I just feel like crushed by all that we've done or all we're trying to do. And that reframe really helped. So the reality is a surprising number of children have had an incredibly productive school year. And we should actually celebrate that for a minute. Like, that's a big deal.
True.
Okay, but so then who do I worry about in school? Plenty of kids. I worry about kids who really don't do well online. And there are plenty of kids for whom the online environment is not effective. I worry about kids where we're missing learning disorders and not picking up learning disorder diagnoses that we would pick up under normal conditions, and we would intervene and get that kid shored up in their learning. I think we're going to see kids who miss several beats because of a missed diagnosis or a delayed diagnosis. And then, we just have to think about really in broad scope, there are kids who just don't go to school now, right? Where
that's right.
They just can't access school, or the pressing needs of daily living crowd out school. Like they're just in the hierarchy of what needs to be addressed. School is low. So glad for this mom that school's not a pressing concern. If we think broadly, I think for plenty of families it is. And I think if we think as a country, we're probably going to see the academic impact of this for years.
That's really troubling. When you talk about resilience, and by the way, for people looking for stories of resilience and hope, check out my show on YouTube called The Rebound. These are stories of how people made it out of tough times. I'll have more details in the show notes. But resilience is so important. When you look at the research, Lisa, what do you see? What does it tell us about resilience? And how are people able to be resilient in tough times?
So, okay, this is really powerful, what we know about resilience in kids. Okay, so I know we're worried about long-term effect on kids, but there is some research that is really, really promising, and I want us to think about that. So in psychology, we actually don't have any pandemic research because the last pandemic was like when psychology was a baby field and we weren't doing giant research studies. But what we do have is that starting in around the 70s, there started to be a lot of interest in studying kids under chronic stress conditions. And then noting that when they looked at kids under chronic stress conditions, which is, we talk about the pandemic in terms of chronic stress, the chronic stress that we've studied are things like, really intense poverty or ongoing maltreatment. I mean, like really, really difficult circumstances. And in some ways more difficult than what a lot of families are contending with right now. And what they found in that research when they were looking at kids under those conditions is that they always were able to find a handful of kids who were okay or like thriving, like actually thriving. And you're looking at the kid's circumstance and you're like, you have no right to be in as good a shape as you are. Like, what's the story? Like, what's the deal? And so there's just this fabulous body of research trying to answer that question. And the summary of that question, like the headline on that question, it comes from a researcher named Anne Maston, who's a psychologist. And she wrote a paper where she talked about the fact that these kids benefited from what she called ordinary magic, like ordinary magic, things that happened at home, protective processes that basically shielded the kids from the broader strain, from the big stressor that was sort of otherwise dominating their lives. And it's so cool because that's actually what we've learned in the research is that if you want to see kids be resilient in the face of long-term stressors, right? Like that's the question we're asking right now. It basically comes down to what the parent does to basically guard them in that context. And when she was talking about ordinary magic, Reena, there's three things that she was like, this is what the parents were doing that got kids through. And it wasn't always a parent. Maybe it was like an aunt or an uncle or some loving grown-up. So the first thing was they were nuts about that kid. Like that kid had love. Like they had an adult who was like, I love the term, like an irrational attachment to that kid, right? And this is what every kid needs is some grown-up who's like, kiddo, the sun rises and sets on you, right?
Wow.
And so what we find is that's almost like, I'm getting this vision from The Incredibles, like when Violet puts up the shield, it's like a force field, like that irrational attachment, like creates a force field around that child, even in the context of other stuff going so wrong. So the first kind of ordinary magic process that we want to focus on is having a really good working relationship with your kid, like really being in there and just enjoying them as much as you can and, providing that warmth and having fun with them, even in the pandemic, is not only fun, but we know is connected to buffering over the long haul.
So when you're saying buffering, it's not shielding them from the reality of what this is, like turning the news off, saying we can't talk about coronavirus numbers. You're saying like creating a shield with love and warmth that envelops them could really help them be resilient.
Yeah, and the data tell us this. I mean, that's what's so cool about these studies is like, okay, well, they didn't study a pandemic, but they definitely studied some pretty long-term ugly business. And usually long-term ugly business that went for the duration of a kid's childhood, right? So we're not even talking like, let's say a 16-month yucky, right? Like we're talking like, an entire childhood.
Wow.
Okay, then the second thing, when we interviewed these kids, we're like, okay, kiddo, you seem to have come out like in surprisingly good shape. Like, what's the story? They were like, I had something that I was doing that felt meaningful. Like I felt like I had a sense of purpose. Exactly. Like, and whether it was like they were really serious about school, or they were really serious about a sport, or they were really serious about religion, or they were really serious about something, but they felt that they were about something bigger. They felt that there was something that they could work at and control, and it was important or valuable. And if you think about it in a way, it's like the pandemic goes all around us and it feels so out of control all the time. I have found my work to be really centering and protective for me.
To have something to focus on and move forward.
Yeah, and to get to the end of the day and be like, okay, the numbers in my community are terrible, but I did accomplish this, right?
Yes.
So it works for kids the same way, right? Like, I don't get to go to school, but I just read a book, right? I mean, it's the same thing. So, helping kids to be about something.
Even if it's something as simple, my son loves flag football. And so they play flag football, or whether I know video games, not so great, but, he's been getting better at doing this and focuses on it and does it every day. Is it ideal? Would I rather have him do something else? Sure. But he feels like, okay. And my daughter is obsessed with baking. She just loves to cook, like gingerbread, like every week it's some sort of new project. But you're saying having them throw themselves into something that they find meaning can help them creating that shield, essentially.
I think so. I mean, being able to get to the end of the day and be like, look what I did, right? And then sometimes it's super fun stuff, which is wonderful. And baking's so fun because you have like, ta-da, there's the product, right? Like, I made that happen.
The reward is great.
I also think, having them do things that they know are important, right? So it may even be things like helping around the house. To say to a child, listen, you're 13, your sister is 9. She needs you. I'm going to ask your help. I'm going to ask you to, she doesn't like when I sit with her to do her homework, but if you've got time, I need you to sit there to do the homework with her. We don't always lean on our kids in that way.
Yeah.
But if it's fair,
I've been doing it all wrong. Why did you guys not take out the trash today? Nobody unloaded the dishwasher. I'm losing my mind.
Give them jobs.
Give them jobs. Give them jobs.
Even little kids can have jobs. We, my younger daughter's, she doesn't have enough chores, I can tell you that. But one of them is, we call her Toilet Paper Santa. Like, it is her job to deliver toilet paper to all the bathrooms in the house, right?
That's a good job.
Yeah, it is a good job. But like, Toilet Paper Santa, we're running low. That's her job, right? So you can definitely build from there. We need to be building from there.
So what would your third thing be?
Okay, so the third thing is a sense of like predictability and control. Like a sense that they know what's happening at home, that life within the house feels reliable and predictable. And so that's where we just have like, when we get up, we brush our teeth, when we take our showers, when we sit down and do school, when we do our homework, eating together as a family, or having a routine around dinner, and having a reasonable bedtime routine. But this is good for kids under all conditions, but especially when the rest of the world feels so uncertain. That sense of, okay, but here I am in my 2-foot world, and I know what's going to happen.
Things are changing, especially with winter coming. What do you worry about from a social standpoint?
So it's very developmental, what my worries are. So I would continue to say, I will persist in saying that probably 5th grade and younger, I don't worry that much. Those kiddos are still like, mom and dad are pretty cool. Like, like you guys can be my friends.
Right.
Okay, middle school, Reena, I have to tell you, it's so clear to me, it's so hard to be a middle schooler in the pandemic because you're so anxious under normal conditions about where you fit in. And then one of the things, and I hate saying this, but I'm seeing it, as kids' anxiety ramps up about their social connections in middle school and where they fit in, I'm witnessing more icky online behavior among middle schoolers. And a lot of it is like a gang up, like a whole bunch of kids will decide, to like fire a friend.
And then the doggy pile on.
Yeah. And you're just like, oh man, like that is the worst glue, right? Like you're trying to make glue in the relationship by all of us being against that person. And I'm like, I get it that you kiddos need glue right now, but like, come on.
Right. Yeah.
And I do think most of that will sort out, but it's exquisitely painful to be excluded in middle school.
Totally. Everyone knows that feeling, right?
Everyone knows
that. You get that. Yeah.
And like it kind of leaves a mark. I hate to say it, but it kind of leaves a mark, and everybody knows it.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to see more of that. Which doesn't mean they're not going to be okay and they're not going to thrive in high school. But I think we need to be realistic that we probably are going to have a cohort of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders who have a little bit more of a cringy feeling when they think back on middle school.
But you do have to intervene sometimes and be aware, because it can be so nasty, right?
It can be nasty. And check with your school, get some help, because it's, and I hate saying that I'm seeing more of it. I am totally seeing more of it.
Wow. I can understand that, because everyone's online now, right?
Yeah, and they're anxious. And so they're like, hey, let's have a gang up, right? And it's just not good. Okay, then for high school, I'm less anxious again, right? So middle schoolers, I'm like, hey, high school, usually they've got things kind of sorted in terms of their friendships. And I actually had a high schooler say to me, I was actually a high school senior, say to me, I just sort of feel like this has accelerated the process of clarifying for me who I'm going to stay in touch with.
Ooh.
And,
just so astute.
Yeah, it was really astute and sort of, pulled away from the mix of it all. Yeah. I got my people. It's very clear to me who my people will be after high school. And I thought, that's really cool. So in terms of long-term social trajectory, I think elementary school kids are going to be fine. I think most high schoolers are going to be fine. Keep an eye on your middle schoolers. This is a really rough passage, is what I would say.
So to wrap it up, Lisa, I'm just kind of curious, what can we as parents do to buffer all this stress? How can we help without getting in the way, right?
You're probably going to get in the way, and that's okay. What you're going to do is you're going to produce the ordinary magic. Like, that is really where it's at. You are going to be Violet in The Incredibles, and you are going to try to create that force field around your child. And that is a force field that is made up of you really being crazy about that kid, you giving that kid meaningful things to do with themselves, even in a pandemic, and you creating an environment that feels it's a controlled one and a predictable one. That's what we know. We're not making this up. It's so good that we don't have to guess. Like, we know that is what prevents long-term problems.
I love some mom posted on Instagram this week. My kids are thriving because they're actually surviving a pandemic at this point,
Seriously.
Putting into perspective what really matters. But I love this ordinary magic, and I've got to rethink how to get them to do the dishwasher unloading. My strategy clearly is not the right one. So, Lisa, what do you have for us for children everywhere?
All right. I have blessingsinAbackpack.org. This is an organization that is a longstanding organization that has worked to get meals to kids on the weekend for kids who typically get their meals at school. So they've been around for a long time. They have significantly expanded their efforts under COVID because a lot of kids aren't going to school. So blessingsinAbackpack.org, especially thinking about the holiday breaks coming up, even for kids who are in school, I think that's where we want to be focusing our attention this week.
That's a great cause to put your money towards. So, Lisa, what about parenting to go?
Okay. It is work to make ordinary magic. So as much as I am sold on that idea, I promise that's the way we want to go. You can't make ordinary magic if you are not taking good care of yourself. So what we need to do as parents, if we are going to buffer our kids, if we are going to shield them from the pandemic, we have to be good to ourselves. We need to be getting enough sleep. We need to be taking some time for ourselves. We need to be getting activity and talking to the people who sustain us. So if you feel like your kid is having a hard time, my advice to you, actually, go take care of yourself so that you can do what needs to be done. Children do not do better than their parents are doing. Really, really, this is about adults taking good care of themselves so we can take good care of our kids.
Put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on your child.
Yep, absolutely.
Thanks so much, Lisa. And for more information on some of the things we talked about in the podcast, be sure to check out our show notes and also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Ask Lisa Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to the Ask Lisa podcast so you get the episodes just as soon as they drop. And send us your questions to asklisa@drlisadamore.com. And now a word from our lawyers. The advice provided on this podcast does not constitute or serve as a substitute for professional psychological treatment, therapy, or other types of professional advice or intervention. If you have concerns about your child's well-being, consult a physician or mental health professional. If you're looking for additional resources, check out Lisa's website at drlisadamore.com. We'll see you next week.